Got it. I love this fan, man. It's awesome.
It's very large.
It's very
The AIDS kind of whole deal is that they stand up for the little guy and challenge ideas and
certainly like
serve explanation.
certainly like a devil's advocate. Like if someone presents an idea, I'm automatically gonna present the opposite, just to know their justification for their reasoning. But it's not that I feel the other way. I just want to do it because I want to challenge their thinking. Like very oftentimes, I am opinionless. I don't really like think one way or the other. I just want to know why I think that way, so I present myself as thinking the other.
Most people in the medical field are either ones or threes.
What's a three?
A three is the successor. So basically, success provides you joy in life. So you're always chasing success. Whereas one is the perfectionist. They're not really looking for like outwardly success, what other people perceive as success. They're looking for like what they know as perfection to do
like
things
trying
right.
to be the best.
Right.
And what they believe to be as best is being
Right.
efficient.
Right.
Like treating other people while like making a bunch of money and being what people consider successful. Yeah, like in a day-to-day. Yeah, that makes sense.
So most people in healthcare most people who are pursuing higher education in healthcare fall into either of those, 1 and 3. And very interesting. I'm a 6.
What does that mean?
The 6 is the loyal skeptic.
Okay.
And interesting enough, it tends to fall along with people who have anxiety disorders because they're loyal to a fault, whereas they're very trusting and things like that, but the skepticism comes in like a fear situation, whereas like, oh, everyone's against me, kind of turns into that. So
And yet you're still loyal to the
Right.
people that perhaps you might have fear towards.
yes, loyal to people who do you wrong, loyal to people who you're fearful of, that kind of situation. Also has to do with authority issues as well.
Anxiety-inducing because they're sort of contradicting ideas that you love this person, so you want to do right by them, but at the same time, you're always fearful of that they may do you wrong. Yeah.
The Enneagram. Check out what Enneagram number you are. We have to look up what Enneagram number you are, Dad.
I'm a 0.
You're pi.
I'm pi, that's it.
Yeah, the square root of 1.
Right, it's 3.14159.
9 is where I ended. Yeah, so it's cool. I like learning about people's Enneagrams because it's
Let me
not...
ask you this. I agree that to an extent, it's easy to generalize people.
Yeah.
You know, like we most understand people when we group them into certain, but like to what degree is there extension of that? You know, like you can think that you're a number 6, but you are not like every other number 6.
Right. And that's the cool thing about Enneagrams is one, not only does does it change when you're fearful versus when you're comforted, but it can also change throughout your life. It's not like an astrology sign where you're always going to be Capricorn or Cancer, Aquarius.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that could be a crippling factor, you know, a crutch to people who automatically assign themselves that they act a certain way due to their personality, and then they have no desire to change such because they think it's just their nature?
Well, that's how I feel with zodiac signs, is that people attribute their personality to what their zodiac is, and most people don't use it for the betterment of themselves to say, this is what I need to work on. They use it to, this is how I'm always going to be. But with Enneagram, it's more like you can find out your strengths and weaknesses, and that's one thing about the Enneagram is you're likely to change throughout your life, so people can know, like, oh, I can change the crappy parts of a 6. So, like, me being a skeptic towards people, which, you know, who knows if that'll change, but I can, or being an Aquarian, I can change that to be more like, so like in comfort, like I may go more towards a 2, or I may more like things like that. So it's what you trend towards in comfort.
At this point, I wonder if we're talking about tropic astrology or Vedic astrology.
So every Enneagram number has a wing on either side. So I'm either a 6-wing 5 or a 6-wing 7. And
you know how I like to get really meta with things, right? So let me ask you this: when you're assigned, when you learn your Enneagram, it's based on like a test that you take, right? So the Enneagram number that you're assigned is entirely based on your perception.
And once you know what the numbers are, you can change the answers to be what you want to be. I completely agree.
Right.
But when you take it for the first time raw, you don't know anything about it, I think that's when you can get the most information. But it's still your perception of yourself.
But but ultimately you can only trust it to be the most accurate representation if you're answering truthfully.
Right.
But you, like a lot of people, especially with like sort of dysmorphias, be it mental or body, may think of themselves in a way that they really don't truly act or look.
100% agree, but that goes for any personality test. I mean, your Myers-Briggs is completely based off you.
So that's why, like, to an extent, you have to accept that these only go so far as to how you perceive yourself.
Yeah, I mean,
so they may not be terribly
That's with anything, though.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying Enneagram is better than Myers-Briggs. I just think Myers-Briggs is more like genetic. I think a lot of things with like, oh, am I shy or am I personable? A lot of that has to do with genetics, and Enneagram more has to do with environment. So? I 100% think that like shyness, introverted versus extroverted, can be due to both nurture and nature, but I think a lot of it has to do with what you're innately drawn to.
Okay, so let me ask you this: being a learned, almost doctor, have you ever come across learning about anything genetically in your chromosomes that would make you lean towards shyness or extrovertedness?
But do you know how many genes there are that we have not identified what they do?
But
it's ridiculous.
Do you think it's equal parts nature and nurture? What you're exposed to post-birth, or do you think that it leans more one way or the other?
I don't know how to answer that, because I feel like it's different for different people. For some people who haven't undergone any trauma in their life, it's probably mostly genetic. And then some people who may have undergone more trauma or extremely traumatic events, they may have to draw more from their environment. So
you feel like trauma can sort of override nature.
Yeah.
So essentially, regardless of what you've been disposed to or predisposed to based on your genetics, it is always available to change based on something
extreme
that happens
conditions.
to you that can, extreme conditions, like something that completely changes your worldview, death or something like that. Yeah. I think that's a very interesting point. I think it's forward thinking. No, I do. I really do. What do you think, Pop?
I don't know.
Like psychological and much more physical.
You gotta look at the hierarchy of needs.
Yeah, but I think at the very basis, a lot more of it was genetic. Like even in caveman times, there were people who were more extroverted, more introverted. There were natural leaders, there were natural followers. And I think that has to do with genetics, and of course our experiences can always change that. but that's just how I've come to understand it.
Based on the hierarchy of needs, I mean, you refer back to, prior to Homo sapien, and you have to appreciate the fact that when these people are focused on the food, water, and shelter that they're getting every day, they're not worried about their psychological needs. That's why you see, and it's sort of like the survivorship bias, because it's hard to say, we don't know that depression didn't exist hundreds of years ago, because if you were alive, you probably didn't have it, but when you don't have to worry about eating and drinking and where you're going to sleep the next day, maybe you don't have time to be sad, and I use sad in front of depression, which I appreciate are totally different diagnoses.
100%. And
that's why you see, a vast spike in 40-year-old white women on antidepressants, as middle class and higher, because especially the ones who are stay-at-home moms, they don't have jobs, their kids are growing and flying out of the coop, and they realize they don't have their own identity, and they're like, oh, I have nothing to do, so you sit around and think.
A lot of mood disorders come from a place of privilege.
Certainly.
I 100% agree.
Yeah. So it's almost like, it's a double-edged sword.
Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Because you are privileged enough to lead a life that allows you to even have time to be depressed, which is like, man, that sucks. But at the same time, it's like, are you concerned about, when you're going to eat? Like, your basic survival instincts don't even have to be involved in the equation, which is a beautiful thing. But then you got to worry about, our brains are so evolved. We've gone so far past, honestly, humans may be a virus at this point. We've gone so far past what should be happening that we are invoking pain and hurt upon ourselves because we don't know what the fuck to do.
Well, I think our basic instinct is survival, right? And so if we don't have a fear of our environment, we have to have a fear of something, right? So that's, I personally think that a lot of anxiety comes from having fear of irrational things, because you have a basic instinct of survival and you don't have anything presently, adjuncting that, or whatever you want to call it. You don't have anything. Yeah.
Sure. Well, let me ask you this. When you said basic instinct being survival, there's and I hope you can agree with this, there's a mass sort of exodus in reproduction as of the past 20 or 30 years. Does that survival depend on extend beyond us? Because if you think about survivalship, us not reproducing is certainly us going against our nature as far as surviving.
I think
but it doesn't affect me right now.
Right. It's developed more into survival of self versus survival of a species.
Sure, like future.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like a me right now sort of environment. We're not really worried about our offspring at all times.
And people can sometimes say,
because if we were, we'd be a lot more focused on the environment, right? And we would be a lot more focused on the ocean.
Right.
Yeah.
Clean water.
Yeah, I tell you what.
Clean air.
Because we got one Earth, baby. And you know what? We do what we can. And there are other planets.
Well, I don't know about the one Earth thing.
Well, no, there is. Well, as far as the planet that we named Earth means dirt. So
Elon's going to solve
it's
that
probably
problem.
dirt, in other words. Yeah. But I tell you what. You know what? Earth will go on. It will. Let me get real. Earth is going to survive regardless. You know what? It's just whether or not the species of humanity, of Homo sapiens, exists upon it. And I don't know that we will. In long term,
there's some who believe that many civilizations have existed before this one.
You mean before our recording,
right before recorded time?
Intelligent species.
People believe that other civilizations have existed 30, 50,
on Earth or in other
30,000, 50,000, a million years ago. Who knows?
Without
some catastrophic event ended that civilization, and we are here to start over.
So we are only as good as the information that is provided us, right? So we have carbon dating in science, and we can date back millions of years worth of fossils. So if these fossils are available, human, or something similar that we can, equate to intellect and things, they're either haven't been found or are being hidden from us. Outside of that, I don't know that those intellectual species have existed. Because if we can go back that far, we would find something.
What about like
pre-Jurassic.
okay.
Maybe we don't know how to find those
What about like
civilizations, though. Maybe they're hidden from us for a reason.
Like their physical
Existence,
Yeah.
that they ever existed, is hidden from us.
if a species before us found a way to find their physical remains and remove them from the crust of the earth, or bury them deeper, then yes, you are correct. They are way more involved beyond us.
They're not lost. They're just, we haven't found them.
Okay, if they were a very maybe like a localized,
Like the what is it?
Like
the
geographically.
right? Going back, we go back as far as we know, maybe 10,000 years
Sure,
or
Homo sapiens.
whatever. But some people believe that 12,000 years ago there was a catastrophic event that wiped out everything, and we start all over.
sure. I mean, I'm not to say that it's impossible.
So for all we know, we are part of maybe millions of years of
starting
existence
over.
of starting over.
Yeah, but my only, I guess, argument to that is we have found that and displayed that in our society over and over again in every other species but humanity. Dinosaurs,
Yeah,
the
and we have
evolution,
not found
the
any-
macro and micro evolution of amphibians, of reptiles. But in human beings, we just haven't found it. And it makes it either you have to take the sort of view that something's being hidden from you,
Middle Earth.
or we haven't found it. And with
Well,
the
we just can't figure it out. It doesn't make any sense to us.
if it's so beyond comprehension,
It's beyond not. That's exactly it. It's beyond comprehension because we don't have. We say a lack of physical data. We don't understand how that could have ever been.
sure. But well, then how do you equate that to having physical data of beings that existed millions of years before even this time? Yeah, which we can cut. Yeah, so it's
Well,
like
that's the
it makes
question.
it makes it hard to compute because if I know millions of years ago physically this thing existed and I can prove it with carbon dating because science is so fucking awesome, and I think that somewhere in that gap this happened, but I have physical evidence of the then and the now and nothing in between. All you can do is question.
But maybe we haven't discovered the technology that will reveal the world to us. Maybe that a catastrophic event is exactly that, and all that came before is now going to be hidden away.
Again, certainly, I am one to. I guess my view is, I am very rarely one to say impossible to things.
Right.
But when you engage in that amount of conjecture, the more and more you propose ideas that have over time similar ideas have been sort of disproven, it makes it less and less likely to be possible, or for me to think that it is a scenario. So again, not that it's impossible, I just think that specific scenario unlikely. And you know what? Well, I don't know what your viewers are like, so I'll hold that for myself.
Well, no, it's important because what might have come before, just because we're not aware of it, doesn't mean it didn't come before.
Certainly. And the same thing with the future. You and I had a similar conversation earlier. Just because something has never happened doesn't mean it can't. Don't ever let your lack of imagination be the reason something sneaks up on you. Be it something you didn't think happened before, or something will happen. Just because you don't know that it's happened doesn't mean it can't. And I live and die by that. Every time I think to myself, no shot, no chance, I think to myself, am I just not being imaginative enough? I genuinely do that. Yeah, you got it. Let's do the fucking, the Elmo, the Sesame Street. Let's think to ourselves, the Bob Ross, right? The guy who he said, a guy said, hey, I'm
The
color.
first ASMR guy.
Yeah, he said I'm color. A guy said to him, I'm colorblind. What can we do? And the guy just grabbed a fucking gray paintbrush and just painted a beautiful scene in gray. Don't let your lack of imagination be what holds you back.
That's right.
So wait, what do I know? Anything could happen.
Anything could happen. Brilliant.